Have you ever heard of a complex system? A complex system is an environment that is created that has so many points of change and so many things interrelying on each other that any seemingly minor imbalance, anything you tweak, could cause a huge change further down the road. It's the whole concept of the butterfly flapping its wings and wherever can cause a hurricane kind of thing. You know, they talk about this for the weather. You know, and look at how good we are at predicting the weather, much less controlling it. Look at things like Yellowstone Park. When they first did Yellowstone Park back in the 20s, whenever the heck it was made made in the teens, and then in the 20s and 30s they tried to help the elk population because the elk population was dropping, and then by introducing more elk to the territory, they screwed up the ecosystem so bad that it caused fields to go, it caused the plains to go dry, it caused the beavers to leave the park because they couldn't control. Well, the reason the beavers left is because the type of tree they used to build their dams was gone because that's what the elk ate. The people, they thought it was the wolves eating the elk, eating the creatures and stopping this from happening. It wasn't, so they tried to get rid of the wolves and it didn't seem to do any good. It turned out the drop in all the other populations were just because of the new creatures that they had introduced. Threw everything out of balance. It's still screwed up today. Oh my, over 100 years. Nearly 100 years later, and they've never gotten the balance right again. And the idea was, I think in the 80s, they started thinking, well, we've screwed this up so bad for so long, we just need to leave it alone and let it take care of itself, and it looks like that may be the long-term choice. However, I went to Yellowstone Park in the, what was it, 2002, I think it was, and everywhere you went, there were burned out trees all over the place, because in 1988, there had been a forest fire burned through, and that policy of, look, don't mess with it because we'll just screw it up, was still in place. So they let a lot of the park burn instead of intervening, because they had been intervening for so long. They had been intervening for decades to prevent forest fires, and by letting some of the park burn, they were actually saving the rest of the park. But the problem is now you have huge swaths of the park that look burned, because it's just, you drive through it and there's just rows, you know, acres upon acres of trees that they're just sticks sticking up out of the ground and burnt, and grass going up between them. And they would tell you that, well, that's healthier for the park overall, because we let it overgrow, and now we're letting it stay burned and letting the park recover the trees. But the people who live at the park, the people who live off of the park, they make their living using the park. It looks ugly. Fix it. So they want to plant more trees. It's like, no, you don't want to plant more trees. And you get this balance going back and forth. So that's a complex system. Now, we have the same problem in healthcare now. In one fell swoop, we've ripped the healthcare system out of the hands of the capitalist entities that are business, and we've handed it over to the government. And they're going to do the same thing to this that they've done to everything they've ever touched. They're going to try and fix it. Rather than trying to sit down and say, okay, what does work, what doesn't work, they're just going to gut it and start over again. And the way we've gone about this has been very, very dangerous, because the current president has sat up on his haunches and said, look, we're going to introduce this law, and it's going to change how healthcare works. So they did this. Congress introduced the law, and it changed how healthcare works. But now they're starting to find the problems with it. And instead of fixing the law, which is what our Constitution says we have to do, we have to fix the law, our current president is simply saying, well, I'm going to change the law. I am going to sit down and decide which parts of the law get enforced, which parts of the law don't get enforced. I'm going to change who's responsible for things, even though it's written in the law differently. I'm going to hold everybody responsible for this other thing that I decide. And he's doing this at press conferences. He's making these decisions and holding a press conference saying this rule's changed. That's not in the Constitution. Our current president, no president, has that ability to do it. And if our current president were in a special case, he wouldn't be getting away with it. If you sat down and looked at what parts of the world have this sort of situation, have this sort of situation where one human being sits down and makes those kinds of decisions on what laws will be enforced, what laws won't be enforced, what the law, and has the power to interpret laws as they go. These are called dictators. There's a guy named Chavez in Argentina, I think it is, in South America, and if you ever watch any of his press conferences, sit down and watch the translation of what's going on, what the man is saying. He's crazy. He's nuts. But our president's starting to sound a lot like him. Just saying, well, then I'll change the law. You hear that a lot from Chavez. And Chavez has the ability to change the law because what their equivalent of the Congress said, well, Chavez has the ability to change the law. Why? Because Chavez, I don't know if he bought them or if he just rules with decree or if he really does just have guns to people's heads, but he has that ability in this country to do that. And we're getting to that point in the United States of America, to the point where it is just a dictatorship. Right now we're at dictatorship light. There's still some wholesomeness there. There's a lot of people who don't want this to happen. But the current president's not meeting a lot of resistance. There's not a lot of people out there saying, look, you can't do this. You can't rule by decree. You can't just you can't just decide what you want to happen and just say, thou shalt do this. It's not how it works in this country. We have to go through elections. We have to go through the due process of law. And that's not happening right now. And it's a complex system. And I hate to tell you this, but they're never going to get it right. They're never going to have a complex system that controls 300 plus million people, or however many people are in this country. It's going to affect every single one of them. And that's just not going to be controllable by one person. There's no way. You can't make a set of rules that applies to everyone that gets it all done efficiently. It just doesn't happen. What you have to do is you have to create an ecosystem where you have the ability to have rules, you have a list of things that you want to accomplish, and you have intelligent, capable people decide what goes on, and you just have to grow an ecosystem. And that's what we had. We had an ecosystem in our medical system that had grown over a century, and it sucked, okay? But it was better than what we're going to have in 5 years. Now, I'm an advocate of socialized medicine, and what we have right now is not socialized medicine. It's the thing that is supposed to fail, that make people want to fight for socialized medicine. What we have right now, the Affordable Health Care Act, is going to fail, and it's going to fail catastrophically. And it is going to cause people to beg the government for socialized medicine. That's what it was designed for. Because there's no way this hodgepodge mess, 70,000 pages or however many pages are in the law right now, it could have possibly ever worked. And anyone who's written a law would know that is just too much to have all in one spot for it to ever work. So it's going to be a really bad next, 5-7 years, and then we're going to end up with some kind of either socialized medicine or nothing. And if we end up with nothing, it'll be much quicker, and they'll just throw it back to the market and let the market chew on it. But if we're headed for socialized medicine, it's going to be a bad 5-7 years, a bad 5 or 7 years to get sick. Don't get sick during that time. Anyway, tell me what you think. I'm putting a link in the description below to an amazing source called the Belmont Club. And this guy he does symbolism, he does examples. He's amazing. Go read his blog and keep reading it.